no one told me about it. How people cry. Well, it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? There's no bother trying to find him. He's not there. Well, let me tell you.
Welcome back. This is my third blog on the channel JHIM-TG, which stands for the book that I wrote, Jimmy Hoffa is Missing the Gap. You'll see a Facebook page link at the bottom of this screen. You can go there to go to any links that I mention. And also above that is a link to the archive book where you can, it's a searchable link. You can go through for free. I want you to read the story, not into selling books, into getting the story out. I've given away more books than I've sold. If you do want a paperback version, though, I don't have any copies. You can get it online, retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. Just there's quite a few. Just do a search of Jimmy Hoffa is Missing the Gap, and you'll find a resource for that. So let's see, just to recap what this book is about. As you know, Jimmy Hoffa was abducted on July 30th, 1975 from the Marcus Red Fox in Bloomfield Township, Michigan, north of Detroit. There were 6 known eyewitnesses that came forward and saw him at the Red Fox between the hour of 2 p.m. and just before 3 p.m. that afternoon. And nobody really knew about it, in the public anyway, until 2 days later on Friday, August 1st, when the Detroit Free Press, Metro Edition, had big bold headline, Jimmy Hoffa is missing, and just above that a tagline that said last seen outside restaurant. So that turns out to be the only clues besides the eyewitnesses that the Bloomfield Township Police, the Oakland County Sheriff's Department, and then within a few days after a ransom call came in to James Hoffa Jr., the FBI got involved, and the 3 authorities just went to town investigating thousands of leads. But the main clues that they could count on were that he was last seen leaving the Red Fox. Please like this page, follow it, subscribe to it, and share it with as many people as are in your contact list. That's the point. Wouldn't it be great if there were eyewitnesses that saw what happened next after the Mercury was seen swerving out of the side driveway of the Marcus Red Fox, turned south on Telegraph Road, never to be seen again? Well, humbly, I'm here to announce I'm the son of the only mouthpiece for my parents, Ken and Frances Tubman, who were eyewitnesses to the 1975 Maroon Mercury Marquis Brougham as it swerved out of the side driveway of the Marcus Red Fox. My father made my mother promise not to tell anyone, not even the police, but for good reasons, as the book details. My goal is not to sell the books, as I said, but just to give it away. It's free. Please go to that link. Since the book was self-published, the story was revealed to several prominent investigative journalists, a couple of high-profile news personalities, and apparently they decided to shelve it. It's an eyewitness account, but they aren't spreading the story, at least not seriously, in favor of more, I guess, the more salacious mob hearsay, popular rumors that keep it a mystery. I think that the eyewitness account actually solves the case when you connect it with other evidence that the FBI had and came across. But after you've learned what this book has to offer, I believe you'll agree with me that we know what happened next, and sadly Hoffa's remains will never be found. I'm going to put up a disclaimer, but the FBI had a lot of evidence it collected, but even with the DNA that was introduced 26 years later in 2001, And they were about to indict Chucky O'Brien, the main suspect, and break the case wide open. But his attorney, William Buffalino II, told the FBI it's purely circumstantial. The Hoffa could have been in the car at any time. And what they're referring to is the hair evidence that they got from the back seat. The 3 teams of specially trained dogs that traced his scent to the back seat. It wafted into the trunk, but they declared that he was never in the trunk. His body was never placed in the trunk, as some rumors say. On that hair strand, though, there were traces of blood and skin, and they were positively DNA tested for Hoffa. And as you may already know, Chucky O'Brien's fingerprints were on a piece of paper and a 7-Up bottle in the mercury as well. Anyway, Buffalino told the FBI it's just circumstantial. Spend your time on finding the real killers. So that was they never did indict anybody. There was an article in Nation World talking about the DNA, and it said it breathes new life into the Hoffa case, and that the single strand of hair would lead to a grand jury in the 26-year-old disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. That was in the Associated Press on September 7th of 2001. But paragraph from that article is, the younger Hoffa said at a news conference yesterday he had been in contact with the FBI during the past year about the DNA evidence. We've always hoped there would be a deathbed confession, he said. It hadn't happened yet. Hopefully through DNA, we now have a breakthrough. Unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere. So I'm not here to convince anybody. I'm just here to tell the story, weigh it with what you know and other evidence that is going to be offered. But as my theme song suggests, he's not there. He's not in New Jersey, he's not in the Ren-Sen, and he's definitely not in a field or house somewhere in metropolitan Detroit or any other metropolis. This is not a rumor or hearsay or some mobster making his bones by saying he killed Jimmy Hoffa. And it's not just my hearsay either. It's not fiction, but it's historical eyewitness news. You'll even see the one actual eyewitness, Frances Tubman, my mother, as she recounts her story in a 2009 video I did. I decided to finally record it after I discovered the FBI had lied to her in a 2006 interview. They went to her apartment in Detroit. I was on the West Coast. And they told her that these people are dead and gone. This is just for closure for the Hoffa family. So they assured her when they handed her their business card after interrogating her for over an hour, up to 2 hours. But as I declare in the dedication, I dedicated the book to the Hoffa family, and said there is no such thing as closure, only justice. And knowing what really happened and who's responsible or involved is sometimes the only justice some families ever get. Here's a letter I'm going to share that I received from both Hoffa children after I had called them. I called each one of them over the years, and finally sent a book to them soon after I had it in print, July of 2020. And on August 10th, they wrote this letter and sent it off to me. But they allude to him in the letter. So because of this letter, it made the book well worth the expense of time, money, and effort. Unlike most authors, and the only reason I call myself an author, this is the only book I've penned to date. It was enjoyable to the point where I might author some other books related or not. But I just want to let you know that you can contact me anytime through the Facebook page, my email. I do put my phone number out, but please don't joke about this subject. It's not funny if it's somebody that is in your family that was murdered. Regardless of Hoffa's activities, he was still a father, a husband, and eventual grandfather and friend to a lot of people. So please respect that when you comment on this site or anywhere. Appreciate it. Kind of a summary of the chapters. There's 9 chapters, and then some in the appendix that links you to quotes that Hoffa said and different resources that I've used, and also to the Dropbox site where you'll find a lot of the research, including Freedom of Information Act files that I got, FBI interviews and interrogations, the Hoffa report, the Vault. I've also just since then learned about another file which I haven't got yet. It's called the Probex. And so there's a lot of legitimate information out there if you're really into this subject. Otherwise, at least read the book through once and then dig into the research after that. Don't get bogged down in all the heavy research. Even the timelines you can kind of skim over, and if you want to go back and kind of do a comparison of them, that's fine. I do Hoffa's timeline that day, O'Brien's timeline, as well as Ken and Francis Tubman's timeline, and how they overlap and compare. They support each other. Okay, so there's the prologue. There's Detroit, Michigan, what it was like for me and my father growing up and living in Detroit. Then there's the events of July 30th, of course, the timelines. Then I start talking about the family secret, the Tubman timeline, and the realization that they had when they realized what they actually saw that day. They did not see Hoffa, I'll say that, but what they saw were definitely witnessed by others connecting Hoffa. And just because he wasn't in the line of sight doesn't mean he wasn't in the car. Then I talk about the Detroit field office, the interview with my mother, Frances, in 2006. And then 2009, my mom came out to live with me in 2007. I was on the West Coast. She was living by herself in Detroit, and it was time for her to move in with family. So she came and spent her remaining years with us. She passed away in 2011 at the age of 94. So that in 2009, we sat down to watch the movie Hoffa for the first time, like it was a documentary. And when we got to the end, that's what got me curious and why I contacted Barbara Ann Kranzer, ordered a copy of the transcript from 3 years earlier, and then started to dig in a little bit with research. It wasn't until my mom passed that I thought, what do I do with this information that I found? Do I let it die too? Or so I just dug into it, and I found more and more corroborating evidence to what they saw. Then the alibis. I discovered the alibis, and so I addressed that. The agenda, the fish, the mercury, Jack's car wash, Louis Linto, who I believe was key, the Raleigh house. I'll explain that. And then I give my opinions. I try not to filter my opinions into the story. I wanted the evidence to be laid out, and at the conclusion, I'll give you my opinions. That's the way the book went. I may throw some in while I'm talking. Then I give some Hoffa trivia, acknowledgments, notes, and credits. Okay. So the cover, I chose the Mercury. It's not the actual Mercury, but there was you can tell it was the same model or same body style as the Lincoln Continental that year. If you saw one, you might have mistook it for the other. But it was a Mercury, and one of the witnesses had seen a maroon Mercury, and that's how they traced it to Joey Giacalone and discovered he had loaned it to Chucky O'Brien that day. For whatever reason, which I'll discuss. And that's how they finally ended up targeting Chucky O'Brien as the driver of the car, which he admitted to. The next picture is the back seat of the car, and that, as you can see, is very roomy. It was probably one of the largest luxury cars on the road at the time. Maybe second to the Cadillac, but It was brand new. It was clean. It was inviting. Because it was roomy, 4 huge men fit into it. Hoffa was short, but he was big and strong, and the other men were good size as well. There were 2 men in front and 2 in the back, Hoffa being on the right behind the driver in the back seat. I'll kind of summarize and skim through. You can read through the book, as you wish, but this story is about to reveal were not told to the police back in 1975 when it happened, but for good reason, which is explained in the book. But to be fair to the eyewitnesses, you might hold back on condemning them for not coming forward. It took them by surprise. They weren't threatened. They didn't realize what was happening. But they were on their way to my sister's house from a townhome in Bloomfield Township, 15.5 mile and Woodward. And I was married in January of that year, and I was living with them to save money because I wanted to move to the West Coast and try and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So they invited my wife to join me in there, and we stayed in a bedroom upstairs in their townhome. It was a 2-story townhome. They were on the way to my sister's house. Their normal route of travel, she lived in Westland, which is just outside Detroit, the west side of Detroit, and Ford Road and Telegraph was the closest major intersection. But their normal route of travel was to go south about a half a mile on Woodward, go right or turn west on Maple, 15 mile, head over to Telegraph, and then go south or left onto Telegraph, Highway 24. At that intersection is where the Malchus Red Fox, in the same town that they live, Bloomfield Township. So at the Malchus Red Fox, it's well known. You had to have a coat and tie to be seated there. I never ate there. It was too pricey. My dad was in the restaurant business, so he was well aware of it. And it was in Bloomfield, in the Bloomfield area, which was kind of an elite section of north suburban Detroit. So it was kind of the place to go if meetings, important meetings, and events. And it was in a little strip center, and behind it were several stores, including a hardware store that became famous that day, Damon Hardware. The overall trip to my sister's is about an hour and 20 minutes, give or take, with traffic. That would be with just moderate, mild traffic. And it was before rush hour, but it was on a weekday, Wednesday. So I would expect that it took them about an hour 20, no more than an hour and a half to get there all together. And it was maybe a 15-minute trek from Woodward over to Telegraph Road, and then another hour plus to Helen's. So I've already told you the purpose of the meeting in a couple of prior segments, so I won't delve into that much, except that his meeting was set for 2. He was there on time after stopping briefly at the airport service limousine at Louis Lintau's Pontiac business. Lintau wasn't there, so he wasn't able to accompany Hoffa to the meeting. He was supposed to meet Tony Giacalone, who was a Detroit mob boss, street boss, and also to shore up some differences with Tony Provenzano from New Jersey, and clear the way for him to run for presidency in 1976. The appeals were not released, and they never were because he was abducted that day. But he expected, and the talk was that it would be granted, that he would be allowed to run. And so he was kind of priming the pump. People in the Union were anxious for him to come back. Fitzsimmons, though, was favored by the Mafia and the Unions, I guess, because he was a little more loose with the money, and they liked that. Hoffa was more controlling. So Hoffa and Fitzsimmons became enemies at this time, vying for the same office. Another person that was going to join him at this meeting was Little Lenny, or Lenny Schultz, and he owned the Southfield Athletic Club, which is where Tony Giacalone was all day. checking his watch, making sure he talked to people. He was not socially, wordy. So there must have been a point of him asking people what time it was all day. So he could use that as a valid alibi for later. But he also had an office upstairs in that building, which was in the Travelers Building at Evergreen Road. So that's where he set himself up for the alibi. And Lenny Schultz, when asked, said he wasn't aware of any meeting either. So that was the trio he was there to meet. As I said later too, he was not wearing a tie and a coat, knowing that was a rendezvous place, and the meeting would likely, which was common, likely be held elsewhere. So anyway, Hoffa was known for promptness. If you were late, he got mad. That was the one requirement that he made of people that he did business with and had meetings with. So although he showed up promptly before the 2 o'clock meeting, by 10 after he was starting to get irate. And the evidence they have from the Michigan Bell telephone log was that at 2:15 he called his wife Josephine. He had gone in briefly to the Red Fox and was seen by the waitress and the hostess. Although the manager of the Red Fox says he didn't come in, 2 people claim, he came in and spoke with them briefly. So that's documented in the Hoffa files. Then he was seen talking on the phone over by Demon Hardware, and that's where the phone log was obtained by the FBI. So he called and he was cussing at his no-shows. Tony Giacalone and Provenzano didn't show up, so he told Josephine, "I'm heading home. I'll be there to cook the steaks by 4 o'clock." After he hung up with her, then he called Louis Linto at the airport service limousine, who answered. And then phone records show that call came in at 2:35. Before this, I believe, is even before Hoffa was spotted. One witness was parked, and a man came out and confronted him and said, "What are you doing? What do you want?" And he identified from pictures that was Salvador Bergoglio, Sally Bugs Bergoglio. So they have in their files at FBI that Bergoglio was spotted at the Red Fox that afternoon. So after the phone call to Louis Linto, 2 men, I believe they were realtors, real estate agents, introduced himself to Hoffa and talked to him briefly. They told the FBI the subject matter of the conversation was casual, shook hands, and he was friendly. And he mentioned his wife, Josephine, was going to have cataract surgery, which was not common knowledge. Nobody would know that unless Hoffa told them themselves. So those witnesses were validified by the subject matter of the conversation they had. The next witness saw him getting into the Mercury Marquis with 3 other men. And then the last witness to see him in the car, which was behind the driver, was a delivery truck driver. And he was entering the same driveway they were leaving, which was the southernmost east driveway of the Red Fox. He said he had to slam on his brakes of his delivery truck. He was making delivery to the center, and in order to keep from being hit by the car that swerved towards him. So he had to come to a quick stop. He noticed Hoffa in the backseat. He recognized Jimmy Hoffa, and he was kind of leaning forward, gestures, and he said he had the feeling he was having words with the driver. He said there were 2 men in the front seat and another man with Hoffa on the opposite side of the car in the back seat. He also noticed that there was the muzzle of a shotgun sticking out between the 2 men in the back underneath a gray blanket. And when they did impound the car on August 9th, there was a shotgun in the trunk. So that truck driver is the last witness on record that said then the car continued and made a right-hand turn and swerved as it left, heading southbound on Telegraph Road. That's it.